Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me? Good afternoon, then. I just would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public or press who have joined us today, either in person or watching via the live stream, to this meeting of the Community Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee at Newshire Hall in Alconbury Weald. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures, tweet or blog during the meeting. But could I please request that members of the committee and the public turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble in the car park. So item 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Officer please report any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Councillor Costello, and Councillor Goldsack is here as a sub, Councillor Ambrose Smith and Councillor Gowing is here as a sub, and from Councillor French.
Thank you very much, Nick. And does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? I don't see any, so we'll go on to item 2, which is the minutes of our meeting held on the 5th of December. We're being asked to approve those minutes as a correct record. Can I ask if any member disagrees with the accuracy of those minutes? No. So on that basis, I'll take those as approved. And we'll go on to the next item, which is public questions and petitions. That's item 3. I'm sorry, I've jumped ahead slightly. Sue, do you have an update on the minutes action log, by the way?
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair. Just to say that since the action log was published, 2 actions have been completed. So Peter Gell, who is in the meeting with us today, has circulated a note on the impact of the terminally ill adults bill. Obviously, that's on the basis of what we know at the moment about that bill. So further updates will follow as further clarity comes through in relation to that work. And Nick has also circulated to all members the report on Closer to Communities, which is before this committee today, but that's been circulated to all members. So the one action that's still ongoing is the Remembrance Day action, which will be responded to within the next couple of weeks. At the moment, the document is with CAPALC, which is the society that brings together parish and town councils. So once we've had their feedback, we'll be circulating that to members as per the action log. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. We've got 2 questions, Philippa and then Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if we're on to the action log now, are we? Brilliant. 191, there is mention there of having suggestions about oh, so sorry, I think I've slipped. It's about community safety partnership. I'm the community safety champion, and we had agreed that before the end of this municipal year there would be something reporting back, because members have actually asked for that as well as I would like it. So can be really sure that it will happen before the elections, because it's one of those things, it would be a pity if it lost continuity. And I know officers are at ease with this, so I just wanted to get it on the record that that should be definitely this municipal year, the community safety report or suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. It is, as it says in the action log, it is going to be discussed at the next spokes meeting in January. So I think that meeting is next week. Yes, my memory serves me correct, it's next week. And so we'll follow up and we'll note the request that's been made in committee today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claire.
Yes, thanks. But in relation to the toolkit for road closures for remembrance events, will it be circulated to members and parish councils at the same time?
Thank you. So yeah, it's been distributed to CAPALC today so that it can go out through their membership list. And we can convert it into a PDF straight away and send that through Democratic Services to all members as well. So CAPALC, I would imagine, would send it out next week. And it will also go into Cambridgeshire Matters, the publication that goes to all parish councils as well. So we'll get really thorough coverage that way.
Might I just comment, Chair, on that? The reason I asked about that is because what I don't want is we go to parish councils and they've seen it and we've not seen it there. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions on this at all? No, so thank you very much for that feedback, everyone. So going to item number 3, public questions and petitions. we have received an application to address the committee today in relation to item 8, which is the Library Service and Archives Service Annual Report. I think, however, the questioner is not present. Nick, did you want to just clarify for us, please?
Yes, Chair. No, the questioner hasn't come, so he'll receive a written response instead.
That's fine. Thank you very much. So now item 4, which is the business plan and budget 25-26 to 29-30. And that'll be presented by the Executive Director of Strategy and Partnerships, Sue Grace. And we're also joined today by the Executive Director of Finance and Resources, Michael Hudson. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this paper sets out the business plan and the budget proposals for this committee, and the role of this committee is to scrutinise these proposals. So at the end of this discussion, I will sum up the response of the committee so that this can be agreed, and the summary that is agreed at the end of this discussion will be forwarded for inclusion in the Strategy, Resources and Performance Business Plan and Budget paper, which will be discussed by that committee on the 28th of January. So, as the Chair has said, I have with me Michael Hudson, Executive Director for Finance and Resources, our Section 151 officer. I've got Lisa Riddle here too, Service Director for Communities, Libraries and Skills, and other colleagues sitting in the room here too. So if committee members have specific questions on aspects of the business plan and budget, then we hope to be able to answer those questions clearly for you today. Section 2 of the report sets out the overall context of the Council's business plan and budget, and the information here is drawn from what was presented to Strategy, Resources and Performance at its meeting on the 17th of December, and Michael will highlight the key points and identify any changes from the December paper resulting from the further clarity we've received from government regarding the funding settlement for local government. So to introduce Section 2, I'll hand over to Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and only a quick introduction for myself, because we are still working through the provisional settlement. We'll be providing the update to the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee at the end of this month. We did see a number of grants rolled into the revenue support grant in relation to a whole range of services, some of which are covered through here, but the overall position remains unchanged going into those discussions for the purposes, I think, of this committee. Overall, including the funding position set out and proposed in those papers for consultation in relation to council tax, that saw funding increase with the government grant by just over £32.8 million between 24-25, the year we're in now, and next year 25-26. But of course, the councils continue to face a whole range of pressures and demand for its services, which have led to a need to find £34.2 million worth of savings from across the patch. Part of that process has been working throughout the year to identify and work towards that position. You will see there's details within the papers and Section 3, which Sue will come on to in relation to this committee's areas of responsibility, and are set out in detail at the appendices. The paper also identifies going forward the continued financial challenges for local government over the coming years of circa 70 million plus in terms of the lifetime of the business plan up to 2030, and also notes the position on the capital programme, something again that is set out in detail for this committee's remit within Section 3. So that's all I wanted to cover, and I'm back.
Thanks very much, Michael. So as Michael says, Section 3 summarises the key proposals in the services that report to this committee. So paragraphs 3.4 and 3.3 and 3.4 refer to some of the changes in the coroner's registration and trading standards services, and these have been set out in more detail in the reviews of these services that have come to committee both in December, and also some of the consideration we'll have today around reviews of those services. Paragraphs 3.7 to 3.9 reinforce work that will be continuing in 2025-26 under the auspices of this committee, which includes the distribution of the Household Support Fund grant, which is continuing for a further year, the continued work on the Poverty Commission and the recommendations emerging from that commission, and the capital investment, as Michael has referred to, which is predominantly for this committee in the library service. Paragraph 3.10 refers to the ending of a time-limited grant to the Domestic Violence Service, which we received previously through the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. The ending of this grant was anticipated and it was referenced in last year's business plan and budget paperwork. And so the service is working with partners now to ensure that the activity that was covered through that grant is picked up by those partners. And we will continue to focus on our core responsibility in the Domestic Violence Service, which is namely to support those at high risk. The paper has some summary finance tables with the details set out in appendices, and at paragraph 4.1.2 we set out the grants that we expect, and as Michael said, some of those have been rolled together into the settlement, and further work and clarity is being considered around all of that. Fees and charges for this committee are set out at Appendix 2. And finally, we have a summary of the capital scheme for this committee, which, as I say, is largely focused on the library service. So thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sue Briner, you have your hand up.
Thank you. In section 5, the capital schemes, it says that those figures are in millions, but everywhere else they're in hundreds of thousands, and I think that's incorrect, isn't it? Can I just check?
Apologies, just finding the place in the paper. Thank you.
It's page 25, if that helps.
Yes, you're correct. They're not millions, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No, it's fine. I will come to Cherry Hinton later when we talk about libraries, but under fees and charges, it's blank for the room hire costs in Cherry Hinton. Is that because we haven't clarified what those costs will be going forward?
Andrew, I don't know if you can clarify that for us. I'd say the question in relation to fees and charges for Cherry Hinton Library, which is blank on the sheet. Thank you.
Yeah, it's under the library, we will no longer have room hire. So it will be part of the Benefit Society, the community
Sorry,
group.
Andrew, could you just come a bit closer to the mic?
So sorry, yes. So in Cherry Hinton, we're working with the community group Benefit Society, and the meeting room hire will fall under the City Council and their remit. So they'll be setting prices rather than the county going forward for that building.
Thank you. We've got Steve, Jeff, and then Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to start by thanking officers for their work on the budget, obviously in very difficult financial circumstances. There's a lot within the budget that we can agree with, but as a Conservative group, we'll vote against the budget as a whole, pending any amendments that we may wish to make in the fullness of time. I just wanted to pick up on the point that Sue made about the Domestic Violence Fund. I understand it's grant funding which has come to an end, but a £277,000 reduction is quite a big blow for the service. So I just wanted to some reassurance how we're going to monitor that service going forward to make sure that we're still making the best use of the funding we've got, so that, you know, those that are in distress aren't missing out as a result of this funding in, because obviously we've made a decision not to add anything from the core budget to make that up. So just some reassurance about how we will, you know, best use those funds, and how we'll monitor to make sure that we're aware if those funds, the shortfall is having an impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Criswell. And I've got Julia Cullum, who's the head of service here, so she can answer this in great detail in response to both assurance and also monitoring of the impact. Thank you, Julia.
Hi. So the grant funding that we're expecting is being lost in the next financial year is composed of two different elements. So the first element is around the service that the IDVA service currently provides around referrals for medium risk referrals from the police. This is funding that's come from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office. And there is a duty under the Victims Code of Practice to ensure that all victims of crime are offered support from a support service. So we've been working very closely with the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office so that they can put alternative measures in place to ensure that those victims do still have access to the support that they need. So there is an alternative provision proposed for April onwards, which will involve the Victim and Witness Hub providing that support. But we are working very closely to ensure that any victims that do need support from a high-risk service, such as the Independent Domestic Violence Advisors, there will still be that pathway for them to enable that support to come through to our service. And then the second part of the grant that we're losing is specific pathways in and specific areas of support into the IDVA service. So as Sue explained, we're making sure that we focus on high risk, our core function going forward, and those pathways where they won't exist anymore in terms of referrals to the service. We are working with our outreach providers, which are currently the Domestic Abuse Support Service, to ensure that victims are able to self-refer or be referred by professionals into that service as an alternative instead.
Thank you very much, Julia. This game of musical chairs we've got going on here is quite good. We'll choose who goes next. No, in fact, Jeff is going to go next.
Thank you, Chair. Several questions, but if I can just ask this one and get an answer immediately for clarification. Page 22, we seem, on the face of it, to have double counted inflation. It occurs or is listed twice, exactly the same amount. I just wonder if that is an error and we've got another £41,000 available to our budget. That's on page 27, did I say that? 22, sorry.
Thank you very much. Just looking to finance colleagues. Is that in the cover report? Forgive me, but no. Okay.
I may need to come back on that. On the face of it, I think, yes, Councillor Stacey spotted a valid point. I looked to my accountant in the room at the back who's hurriedly either messaging me or just going through the tables. So we may come back to that, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you. Well, these things happen, so it's not so terrible. It would be good if there is another 41,000 for the kitty. Two questions. In general, I mean, we are receiving a lot of financial information, a lot of numbers, and on the whole, we do have detailed explanations of what the money is being used for, which is good, but we don't have any information on the detailed underlying assumptions. Now, it's not for this committee to try and sort of analyze in depth the budgets, but it leaves a lot of questions because we see a number presented to us and we don't really know how it's been provided. I'm going to pick on one, which is actually not necessarily my favourite subject, but a subject that has come up and will come up later this afternoon. It's paragraph 3.4 in connection with trading standards, where we're told that there's a fair amount of work that is going to be added to the burden of trading standards. Now, we'll probably discuss a bit later on. They do a great job, and there's not that many people there. But nevertheless, the budget seems to be contained in exactly the same figure as it was last year. And we know that things are going to come up. And one of them is obviously something that I'm interested in, which is the possibility that the Food Standards Agency may make, even in this course of this year, a ruling that allergen information should be made mandatory. So the question really is, would this not give trading standards additional work and therefore additional costs? And I think that's sort of exemplified if we actually go to the detailed table. Sorry, I've got it now in front of me. But the only extra provision is for inflation. We're not told how the income is derived. Actually, it'd be a very interesting question to find out. For me, at any rate, how income, but I presume it's certification and after inspection, I don't know. But those figures seem to remain exactly the same in this coming year. We note that in the following year, there's a possibility of increased costs, but we're told that they can be contained. So I'd just like a little bit more detail on that one, if I can. I do have another question, but I'll leave that one open for the moment.
Thank you. So I'll invite Peter to be the next one to take the mic. So Peter will be
Sorry,
able to
Peter.
address this question. No, thank you very much. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for the question. We have seen in recent years a number of new pieces of legislation adding what we describe as new burdens as far as regulation. And there are discussions at the moment taking place at sort of government level, looking at how sort of some of these areas can be funded. Typically what has happened, there's been small pockets of funding that have generally been one-off and have not really been sustainable. But what they are looking at now, and there's certainly discussions with one government department around funding apprentices within regions that will sit and be managed through sort of regional trading standards groups. There's conversation at the moment, suggestion around there's probably 7 apprentices that may end up in the eastern region, of which we're seeking to see if we could have one. And that gives us an opportunity there to develop them to support these sort of areas of work and post the funding, be able to bring those into the organisation and replace those that sort of retire from the service through that process. So I think that is a much better outlook for ourselves going forward in order to sustain delivery around some of these functions. So yes, these discussions are taking place at the moment, and hence we've not been able to put that within this report. But in the past week, I've had really positive discussions at a regional level about funding, which will enable us, hopefully for 2025-26, to bring an apprentice into the region and be part of a regional cohort.
Fair enough. Thank you. Can I ask the last question?
Go on then. Yeah.
It's just on, and this is about my understanding, not anything else. The HSF grant is in effect, as it's accounted for here, in effect a pass-through. I mean, we get the money from government and we then allocate it according to need to various of our residents. We don't know, obviously, whether it's going to come back in 2006-7 or beyond. But if it's not really a financial question, what happens if it doesn't? I mean, there's a lot of people in need. How are they going to be looked after? So I'm looking forward rather than this particular financial year.
Thank you. So for the Household Support Fund, the money that we receive into the council is used for 2 purposes. So firstly, a proportion of the money goes to fund the free school meal vouchers in holiday time. So that's proposed to continue. And the rest of the money is available to people through direct awards. So there's set criteria on our website. People can either apply directly to us or through a series of trusted partners to apply for cash. But they can also receive support through income maximisation. So the citizens' advice support that we heard at committee last month, some of that work is also funded through the Household Support Fund. And we also make contributions to things like the availability of white goods through the fund as well. So that's what will happen throughout the next financial year. Looking ahead then to the year after, yes, you're right. We don't know with any degree of certainty whether it will be extended again. The scheme has been extended. I think we're in the 7th iteration of the scheme now, but it's always been year-on-year extensions or 6-monthly extensions. So with us not knowing definitively what will happen beyond March next year, We will then call upon the findings from the Poverty Commission to influence how we best utilise the investment of the £2.2 million that this committee have allocated to anti-poverty work. And it may well be that those recommendations are to increase more things like income maximisation, or to invest more in things like the local assistance scheme. But obviously we're waiting to hear the outcomes of that commission and those recommendations.
Thank you. Am I correct in looking at the figures, as it were, the starting position this year? It was the total cost last year was about 5 million. So we bore most of that cost. The council bore most of that. Is my interpretation of the account correct? Sorry, that's really what I'm asking. If we look at last year, I mean, I thought that we did get HSF last year, so I'm a bit confused because we've shown the starting position as 5.3. I haven't got it in front of me. Let me find it.
Without referring back to the paper, I will have a look at the table in a moment, but just to confirm that we did receive Household Support Fund for the full year.
The total cost of that whole budget was
And
60 million, and it's now down to 10 million, isn't it?
Let me have a look at the paper and I'll come back to you on the numbers, but just to confirm that for this financial year that we're currently in, the full Household Support Fund money was in the region of £7.2 million, and that full amount will be spent on the distribution of either direct awards or food vouchers. I'm just going to have a look at the table to check which part you're referring to. Have you got a page number?
Yeah,
sorry, Councillor.
just let me, I'm looking at table. Good, isn't it?
Do you want to come? We can come back at the end and tidy up that question if you want. We don't have to do it now. I'm just conscious we've got Claire and Ros who we'll come back at the end, Jeff. So Claire and then Ros.
Thanks, Chair. On the section on government grants 4.11 and the section below that, where government grants are based on population, are they based on the latest population figures, or are they taking the 2021 census figures? Because obviously there's been quite a growth in some areas since then. So are we getting the amount of money that we should be getting?
So the honest answer is neither. This is outdated data, and we don't always have the full transparency from government. So I couldn't quote with any certainty in terms of which numbers were necessarily used. I think it's a accepted fact that it is not the latest data.
And just to say, the list that you have there, there's a range of grants from different sources. So, for example, the money we received to support the Cambridgeshire Skills Service is predominantly from the combined authority, and obviously this committee hears the detail both about how that money is received, but also how it is allocated and the funding regime and the way we have to report back on learner numbers and learner completion. So there are different things around that grant. You've also got in this list some Arts Council funding for the libraries, and that's very much project based. So you put together a project and then your project is supported and you receive it in response to the project. So I think there's quite a range of grants there that are put together on different bases. Just to make that clear, they're not all government grants directly from government to us based on a formula that is based around our population.
Might I just come back on? Yes, thank you, Chair. I do accept that, and I did mention, where they are based on population. I suspect, well, let me just offer the comment, going back to what Michael was saying, that where possible to take up with the sources that provide the funding, that we're not getting what we deserve.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note that on the same day as the provisional settlement was announced, there was a funding review consultation or funding reform consultation that was published by government. The intention is to simplify the funding process and to see many grants rolled up into a revenue support grant that will have a block mechanism, as is presently looking likely, to distribute that. The area cost adjustment the formula used to adjust then those grants is something to be determined, although there is a heavy view that that will be deprivation based as opposed to more simplified population based, but where it's not, then it would fall back to population. There is then a question mark about what and how you measure that, but also there is a concern in terms of the audit trail, seeing those grants that are taken into that pot and ensuring actually not only will the potential formula of distribution change, but therefore how will you track that to see what your original base was to how they have calculated it. So it is something that over the next year we are going to be very keen and very closely monitoring with government to identify what that is. So it will be a very different landscape this time next year. That's about the only thing we can say with any certainty.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We've got Ros next. I was going to ask a question, but that was about Household Support Fund. So that may link to what Jeff's asked. But then Alex has also indicated she wishes to speak. So we'll go to Ros and then we'll tidy up other things.
I just wanted to ask about the fees for library services. So there's sort of two questions. One is the renting out a room costs look as though they're increasing sort of roughly by inflation, which seems very sensible to do that every year. But I've got no idea. And there's a big difference between, it looks like there's a big difference between the hiring a room for a community group and hiring a room if you're a business. And I've got no idea how well those rooms are used. And it would be really helpful to understand that and whether, and you know, as a normal person, £58 an hour seems like a lot of money, but maybe if you're a business, that's great. And lots of businesses are using those facilities. So what's going on there? And then the inflation thing made me look at like the photocopying fees. And again, it seems fine that that's not increasing, but I've got no idea how long like a black and white copy has been 10p for, and is that still a sensible price? I don't know. It's sort of plucking figures out of the air, and I've got nothing to base these figures on. So could I get some advice, some comment?
Yes, thank you. And Gary, Andrew, we've got colleagues, I'll put it that way, from the library service who will be able to answer with greater expertise than myself. So I'll hand over to Gary and Andrew from the library service. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So in terms of category of...
Gary, could you just close to the mic if you can? Yeah, thank you.
Apologies, start again. So yeah, in terms of category of...
just bring the microphone a bit. Yeah, so or whatever. Yeah, folks.
Can you hear me? Yeah. In terms of category of hirers, we break them down at the hiring point. So commercial bookings account for about 15% of our bookings, community 31%, and so forth. So we do break them down by category at the point that the bookings are made. On the income side, we don't separate it out into those categories, but we do know that room hire, the commercial rather, is about 49% of the income that we achieve for room hire. And just to add for context, some of those hirers are significant. So, you know, you have small hirers, but also banks, for instance. So what we try and do with the income is align the need to generate the income, but also social good, if possible. We know that banks are withdrawing from communities. So banks providing services out of libraries is a win-win. And on the photocopying point, I'm going to turn to Andrew for that one.
Yes, so at the moment, it has been the fee for quite some time, the 20p. I think we do have a look locally, so we look at what the competition is and what's in. We're not there to undercut anyone, and equally we're not there to suddenly have no one use us, so it's a bit of a review that way. There will be a slight increase in printing, you'd have noticed in there, but we're going to try and limit that by offering a cheaper version if you print on both sides of the page, things like that. So trying to sort of cost recovery as much as income generation on those sides.
Can I just come back? The rooms, are they being used? Are they being well used? Could they be better used? Or yeah, how are the spaces being used?
It does depend on the rooms and the places. So you'll notice the different prices, and that can very much depend on Milton Road, brand new facility, beautiful rooms, large space, central Cambridge being a different rate somewhere else. In terms of usage, it is something we monitor. And it's very mixed. So we've had some great success in Chatteris under the Know Your Neighbourhood scheme, bringing in a lot of community groups to run events and activities. So it sort of does ebb and flow, whereas Wisbech has done very well with, say, commercial hirers, banks, CTEC doing an ESOL course, things like that. So I'd say well used, but can always be better. We're always sort of having a look to see if we can. And of course, this year we've been used more by CCC colleagues, which has helped sort of fill up the rooms during the day.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Alex next. And I know you've got a point you want to make, Jeff, or perhaps do that after we've heard from Alex and she's had her question. Yeah.
Thank you. Mine was actually linked to Councillor Sip's question around the Household Support Fund. So it's a follow-up to that, and probably Tom, yours will be as well, because I think Councillor Sip is right to address this longer-term implication. And I've been quite critical, like in the past, in the way that like lots of grants are so short-term that first of all makes it very difficult to plan and also to see the effects long-term of any anti-poverty investments. So I'm really pleased this links to the Anti-Poverty Commission and the work the Commission is doing and perhaps getting more longer-term solutions to address the root causes of poverty. While I think it's very good we have the 6 million investment and it's secure for this year, I'm also conscious that so many councils, like including in our area, had to close applications early before the actual deadline of the fund because of the increased demand. I don't think we can say we're expecting demand to decrease given the cost of living is still continuing. People still have needs. There's more complexity of needs, of course, the implications of population growth as well. So I do think, like in terms of like our conversations with central government as well and looking into, for example, the Child Poverty Commission the government is doing and feeding back some of the findings of our local Anti-Poverty Commission into those national conversations is really important to say that we can't just have this 6 months by 6 months planning. We can see the results, the very good results of income maximization work. So I'm really pleased that part of the anti-poverty budget investment that we have, it includes this business advice contract, which is really important to actually do that longer term work. So yeah, well, I think it's great news. It's continued. Yes, I take the point. We don't know if it will be renewed. Every time you're waiting until the last minute, it has implications for staff, for like keeping the local knowledge within the council and beyond our trusted partners. So I do think we need to make the case that yes, we really welcome that, but at the same time, we need to think about how those funding decisions are made nationally and actually address the root causes and income maximization work. So yes, the question was around how can we perhaps think about feeding back some of our local findings when the Poverty Commission reports back into those national initiatives. I'm particularly thinking about the work on children and child poverty because it's a particularly pressing issue, which I think has, worsened recently. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. That's a great point. I do apologise. My phone was vibrating now. It was on silent though. A good point. I think perhaps we can just clarify Jeff's question now. I think the uncertainty around household support fund is frustrating, isn't it? Because governments of both parties have said they're not going to renew it. Then at the last minute they have. That's welcome, but it means that the people we've had in place, they don't stay around because they don't think they're going to have an opportunity to offer the help to people. So we lose that experience as well, don't we? So just wondering how can we perhaps deal with that going forward? Obviously the figures here show a nice level of funding, and then of course the next year it's removed because we don't have that certainty.
Just in response to that, you'll recall in this committee back before Christmas at the December meeting, we did commit to the Citizens Advice contract over 25-26 and 26-27. And we did make a commitment through this committee to support that out of the 2.2 million commitment. Again, this committee has made towards the anti-poverty work. So I think this committee has taken already some action to anticipate the fall away of the Household Support Fund in 26-27. So I did just want to remind us of that position, but obviously notwithstanding that, then I think obviously there's points to be made here and actions for us to follow up in terms of making representation to government about the findings of that commission. And as Michael said, the way we can influence government around support around child poverty and through the child poverty action work that's taking place. So, but I did just want to make that point. Thank you.
Sure. Chair, can I just clarify your question was around the expertise in the service of the Household Support Fund at the moment?
Yes, it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I should have clarified.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much. So really just to reassure people that we've reviewed the service model for this year. We knew about the implications of losing a bigger staff team at the end of the last funding period. So we've very much changed the model. We are far more focused on those outward facing pieces of work like the citizens advice, the income maximisation, and making sure that we've got the resources available to people. So we are doing a lot more of the processing of the direct awards and upskilling our partners as well. And all of that feeds into the Poverty Commission work also. So where we have had people in the past year at risk of redundancy, what we've also done is worked with them to secure them alternative employment within the council. So we haven't lost their skills and their knowledge. We've been able to distribute those to other service areas.
That's great, Lisa. Thank you very, very much for that. Jeff, have you found the info I think you were looking for?
I have indeed, and it sort of leads me on to another point, really. But if we look at page, oh God, come on. Yeah, table one. This is an accounting point as much as anything else, I think, rather than a point of substance. We'll make another comment on it. But if we look at strategic management, et cetera, communities, libraries and books, in the previous year or this current year, the net cost was 5.4 million. That's how it's been recorded. Whereas obviously after an HSF grant, it would have been much less or negative as it is in this current, well, it is in this current year. So what was happening? Where did the HSF grant go to? I'm sure it's there somewhere, but you can see that the total budget last year was 16 million, whereas this year after that grant, it will be 10, thereabouts. So it's possibly explaining how the grant was accounted for.
Chair, can we clarify what we're looking at? Sorry.
Yeah, if you look at
table 1, is it on page 29?
Yeah. And if you look at the line strategic management, communities and libraries, the cost last year was recorded as 5.4. My reading with my glasses, I can see the thing. But after HSF grant, it should have been either negative or very small, as it is in this current year. 624 after grant.
So when Michael is going to come back on that one.
I'm just really just asking how the grant was accounted for last year.
So thank you very much. We've identified the line that you're talking about, and we'll take that away. And because personally, I would hesitate, certainly surrounded with my colleague on my left-hand side here, the 151 officer, but we need to clarify whether the income budget that you're seeing there actually includes the household support fund, or whether it includes other income coming into the communities, libraries and skills service, and not the household support fund. So the breakdown of what that income is, we will look at that in detail and supply that to yourself and the rest of the committee members, so that we can be clear in response to that.
That's great.
Because inevitably these tables you are seeing figures that are aggregated, therefore detailed questions. Often we appreciate that you want the detail that sits underneath that, so we'll take that away. Thank you very much.
Okay, can I just make 2 other comments very, very quickly? One, going forward on the support that House HSF gave. I mean, we were quite lucky that we didn't use the reserves that we put aside this current year. And that will presumably fund, indeed, the domestic violence and service, etc. for 26-27. It still leaves the big question as to what will happen after that. But that's for next year's money. And the other general point, I want to just come back on the point that Councillor Haythorne was making. We heard the explanation about revenues in the libraries from the various sources. I mean, there are lots of different headings there, but I just want to ask the general question: how confident are we of the revenue generation projections? Because there's so many different factors there. It seems, I mean, we can base it on what happened last year, but are the same trends happening this year? For example, you talked about competition in copying and services, for example. So is there a change in that? Will those revenues that have been projected stand up? That's just a general question, really.
I mean, I don't know if Andrew wants to take that in terms of the library service in particular, which is obviously where income generation around the fees and charges that are set, and then the confidence factor in relation to that. But obviously, Andrew, you may want to make a comment on that with respect to the library service, but appreciate you're making a more general point. But actually, officers do look at trends. They also, as I know, historically in the library service, they've seen where they've had a fall off in certain things, you know, DVDs and CDs being an obvious one, and therefore the fees and charges are reviewed and adjusted according to the patterns and trends of how things, the take up from members of the public or community groups within the library service, and then that intelligence from the service is fed into the fees and charges, and so some you will see rise by inflation, which is the typical approach, but some over time you might see also diminish as an income target against a certain line. So just to assure you, that is both reviewed as we come into a new financial year and monitored during any financial year. And if we see that an income target is not being addressed, then we look at alternative ways of making up any shortfall. So in answer to your broad question, hopefully that will suffice. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or points that members wish to make? No. Well, first of all, thank you very much to all the team. Thank you very much, Michael, for... Oh, sorry, Michael, you want to come in?
Chair, apologies. I'm conscious there is one question not responded to in relation to the 41,000 and the Word document. Just to confirm that that is a duplication and an error. However, that error is not being carried forward or replicated in the table in the appendices. So there is not another 41,000, unfortunately. It is only purely a Word as opposed to a spreadsheet. So.
I think we all had ideas about where we could spend that 41,000, didn't we? And Claire's probably got some, Claire.
No, I haven't, Chair. You'll be pleased to know something completely different. Please, could I ask if people are speaking that they actually pull the microphone apparatus towards them and speak into the microphone? Otherwise, it's really stressful trying to hear. And that goes for all of us, if you wouldn't mind.
I'm speaking as close to the microphone as I can possibly. Yeah, no, you're right. That's a very good point. You're not using your microphone, Councillor. First of all, thank you very much, Michael, for that answer, and for giving us your time in being here today. And thank you to all the officer team for your hard work and answering questions ad hoc today as we've sort of pinged them towards you. It's greatly appreciated. So, as was outlined earlier, the idea of today was really that we discuss and scrutinise the budget proposals for this committee. That will now be considered by Strategy, Resources and Performance, and then go into full council. So there'll be two opportunities for members to just dissect this further and to vote on this. But for today, we've got three recommendations. I'll just read through them briefly. Consider and scrutinise. Sorry. Apologies, I've jumped ahead a little bit. Do you want to summarise? Michael will summarise.
Thank you, Chair. It's just important so that when we take the notes, because the meeting is so close to this meeting, we want to be ensured that from the scrutiny, when Strategy and Resources and I recognise there are a number of those councillors here that sit on that committee, we truly reflect back the debate, the areas that were covered, and importantly, in terms of recommendation B that you will now move to in a minute, that if there are any changes and amendments and brownie points, because I think this is the first committee to raise one of those, that we can flag that to the committee and move forward. So I think the committee's received the report and raised the following points around the draft proposal as part of its scrutiny role. So the first point was that capital is shown as millions in the table, but should be thousands, and that does need to be corrected, and that is the one amendment I will put forward. There was debate about Cherry Hinton fees and how they've been determined, and clarity provided that now falls to the City Council. There was reassurance provided on the domestic violence and the best use of the budget provided by the head of service there and how that was moving forward. The inflation point in relation to the 41k that I've just made clarity of, although that's not an amendment for SRMP, it's a correction to the documentation in front of you. Questions were raised about the level of detail provided related to the assumptions for members to scrutinise. For example, paragraph 3.4 relating to the extra work in relation to trading services, and the head of service gave assurance around that and how that would be dealt with. There was clarity sought around the Household Support Fund, how it was treated, the level of service provision. A number of councillors asked what happens if it doesn't continue, and that was clarified in responses. There was question raised about the grants and how they've been calculated in terms of population data, and it was clarified that they're not in all cases, and it's certainly not the up-to-date position, and that is a national position. In relation to the rent for library rooms, clarity was sought on the fee structure, and again, clarity was provided there by the officer. And finally, there was a question mark about the robustness of forecasts for revenues within libraries, which again, Head of Service gave clarity on. So I think as a result of the debate and contributions, the following change or action is recommended to be passed to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee for their consideration on the 28th of January, and that is for officers to review all tables to ensure that the correct presentation of millions or thousands is reflected in the report that then goes to Council for voting on.
Could you repeat? No, I'm going to ask you to repeat all that. No, that's very well. It's very well summarized. No, that's very well summarized. And I take it, Nick, you're content. That's your understanding of as I'm going to take, and that's great. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. And just, I think the final point to make, we will just clarify, because with respect to the room hire at Cherry Hinton Library, we think that sits with the community group rather than the City Council. So it's the community group. So we will make that correction to Michael's summary, but well done, Michael, as a not frequent attender at this committee. That was very impressive. And I think, bearing in mind Councillor Criswell's comment earlier, that it would be appropriate for us to record that the majority of the committee supported the proposal set out in this paper with respect to the business planning and budget, if people would be comfortable with that as a summary. Is that okay?
You content with that, Steve? Is that capture? Yeah, adequately? Okay, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, so I think what we're doing today is we're just giving a flavour of our views on this, and we're going to convey that, as Michael has summarised neatly. We're going to convey that to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee on the 28th of January. Also receive the fees and charges schedule for the committee included in Appendix 2. So are we content with that we've summarised adequately and captured everybody's views? Excellent. That's great. Thank you very much for your contributions.
Sorry, Chair, we do need to vote on the recommendations.
Okay, we need to vote on that. Can I ask for all those in favour, please show? Thank you. And any against? Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And my apologies for being a bit previous. So now, on the basis of that vote, you can say that the majority of the committee have supported what's contained in this paper in terms of the business plan and budget proposal. So thank you, and my apologies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going on to the next item, which is closer to communities, the final considerations. Looking at the pilot programme, and that'll be presented by the Closer to Communities Project Manager, Jess Kennedy. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. This report seeks to provide the final update concluding the work of Closer to Communities. In July 2023, this committee approved proposals to test new ways of working through a series of pilots that support services to deliver their work closer to communities. The pilots were selected based on their alignment to the Council's strategic ambitions, their geographical spread, and their ability to provide a mix of strategic and tactical opportunities, with many of the pilots reflecting challenges that communities face. The pilots were experimental in their nature, employed to test out the practicalities, opportunities, and challenges of working close to communities across Cambridgeshire. It is important to note that whilst the Council led most of the pilots, most were delivered in partnership, and in some cases the Council was not the lead. The goal for the pilots was fundamentally to enable learning, which is presented within this report, and the full evaluation paper, which is Appendix 1. 4 themes were identified to track the learning from the pilots, which included devolved decision-making, devolved funding, co-designed and co-produced, and place-based and targeted approaches. Overall findings from the work identified how efforts to support working closer to communities, empowered our communities, encourages innovation, strengthens social capital, enables communities to develop tailored solutions, leads to more responsive and efficient service delivery, and promotes accountability and transparency. From the work of the portfolio, there are opportunities for the Council to mainstream, embed, and continue its journey, building upon successes, challenges, and lessons learnt. These are demonstrated in the table of considerations, which will underpin and in some cases specifically direct aspects of the Council's Our Future Change strategy. The 14 considerations are intended to help inform strategic direction, identifying how the organisation should approach its next steps. The success of this work highlights strong cross-directorate collaboration driven by shared commitment and strategic alignment. Key stakeholders from multiple directorates actively contributed using their expertise, resources and time, and their buy-in played a crucial role in shaping the direction of the work and ensuring successful outcomes. To conclude, this work demonstrates the progress of the Council's approach to bringing services and support closer to communities through the delivery of a series of pilot projects, evaluation and considerations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess. Greatly appreciated. The report is incredibly thorough. Also, if you look at the appendices, which is where all the useful, really interesting stuff is contained. So it's all interesting, but there's some really good stuff in. I was reading the case studies, some really good things there. And I think you said this is longer than your university dissertation. Is that right? So you could probably apply for another master's in public policy or something with all the work you've done. It's appreciated. So we'll go to questions, and we've got Claire.
Thank you very much for the report. Could you tell me if there's a map anywhere on the report, or have I missed it? And if there isn't, might I suggest that you include a map in its next iteration so we can see the spread or indeed concentration of projects across the county? That's one question. My second question relates to the involvement of members. It's great, and I've long been an advocate of cross-directorate, cross-committee working, and it's great to see that, and you've brought that out in the remarks that you've just made. But it would be good to see where members have fitted into this cross-committee working and the development of the projects. I have got other questions, but if I could.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I'd noted down the questions. So with regards to the suggestion of a map, we did have a map in the original papers which demonstrated the distribution. In order to identify it within the paper itself, underneath each pilot project, there is a tally which identifies which district it sits within. So if you were to turn to the first project, on page in section 8, it would say number 1, detached youth work, and underneath it would say the district, Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire.
Might I just come in there? I understand that, but what would be helpful will be to have the overall picture of concentration or indeed spread of the project. So that's my suggestion for a future iteration, because it would give an overall picture. That was my point. Thanks.
Is there something you wanted to answer, Jess? Yeah.
Chair, can I?
Lisa, I couldn't see you there,
No,
sorry.
it's okay, thank you, Chair. It's just going to say that the map that was in the original paper, we can recirculate that because it was a visual representation of exactly where they're distributed. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. And just to say, so this is the final iteration of the evaluation, but we can certainly reshare that information. And in terms of member involvement, I think there were 2 workshops that linked to members throughout the duration of the project, and we've obviously brought this as a piece of work, as a programme, back to committee twice for updates. And then on a very local level, we've really worked with the officers on the ground to make sure that they are linking with the members who are in the division where the pilots have taken place, or where it's county-wide. Obviously, we've brought it through committee. But I think we've also picked up significant learning through that. And I know a lot of the feedback was about how we actually communicate with members, how we keep people updated, and that features in the considerations that are in the paper that we need to push forward as well.
Yeah, might I just come back on that, Chair, if that's all right? Maybe it's me and I need to read it more carefully again, but I don't see mention of members in this paper and member involvement actually mentioned in the paper. I don't, as I said, I really, honestly, that might be me not reading it carefully enough. So my feeling is that we need to reflect in the paper, in the report, the extent to which members were involved, as you've just described.
And just to say, in the table that's listed in the paper, there's a consideration number 6 where it says Cambridgeshire County Council should enhance the officer member engagement by reviewing and developing the guidance and exploring awareness and training opportunities for officers. And then there's some further information related to that. So as Lisa said, I'm sure there's much more to be said on that, but we did capture that point that actually that in certain areas that was a gap, and that was something we needed to learn from this work and improve on in the future.
Good, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Steve and then to Philippa.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, a lot of work has gone into this, for which I congratulate officers. But I'm afraid I must express my disappointment that I expressed at the beginning of this project. And I suppose, apologies to officers that have joined more recently. This is probably more aimed at the administration. But reading the paper, you'd be forgiven for thinking the world was created in July 2023. And obviously there was a huge amount of work that preceded that. And over the previous 10 years, we had localism pilots, a community resilience strategy. We spent 2.3 million through the Innovate and Cultivate Fund, specifically designed to trial local schemes, which was assessed by officers from across the council. And the learning was very similar from what's before us today. We learned a great deal about integrated neighbourhoods, anti-poverty, co-production, healthy lifestyle projects, social prescribing, place-based working with partners, innovation, preparing communities for a new model of social care, and we transformed our libraries into a community service. With Think Community colleagues, after extensive consultation 4 years ago, we launched Cambridgeshire Local as the delivery vehicle for this. Under the new administration, that was all stopped. And officers that have been mainly involved with this left the council. Over 2 years later, in July 23, the whole learning process seems to have started all over again. The name has changed from Think Communities to Closer to Communities, and from Cambridgeshire Local to Our Future Council. But otherwise, Chairman, it feels very much like we've lost 4 years and we're back to where we started 4 years ago. So some very good work, but actually we could have been so much further forward than this if we'd embraced what was already happening rather than starting from scratch. I'm sorry, but that's the impression that I've got. As good as some of this is, it hasn't taken us that much further forward than we were 4 years ago.
I was going to ask if there was a question in there at all, Councillor Criswell. Was there a question in there? You just wanted to make that statement. Well, I would say I don't think we've ignored the work that took place previously. I think we've built on that. And the work you did, a lot of it was very good. So I think we've actually improved in some respects. We've learned from that. That's brought us to the place where we are now. I think we have an incredibly comprehensive report and set of outcomes here. So I recognise that you perhaps felt you needed to say what you have. That's absolutely fair enough. But I don't think I quite quite share your pessimism in some areas, but nonetheless, thank you very much for your comments. We'll go to Philippa, then we'll go to Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, some of what I don't want to overlap too much with what's already been said by Councillor Daunton and the responses.
I'm going to ask the Councillor Daunton question. Could you please speak closer to the microphone?
I've just moved it in front of my. I see it. It's got a bit of a directional thing. I hadn't realised. There we are.
Yep.
I will lead in with the response to Councillor Criswell, because in fact I was well prepared by Councillor Ashwood, who passed on various batons that Councillor Criswell has started, and the assessment from her as well was that COVID made a big difference in breaking down the barriers that previous work and the previous administration had recognised the barriers but found them hard to break down. But there's nothing like having a pandemic to make sure that district and county barriers broke down, and some of them are not being built again. So I'm very pleased to see these action points. The continuing to actively strengthen partnerships. I know we lost the P from our COSMIC acronym, but I do like COSMIC as a name, I must admit. But that's not to say we don't do partnerships, and it's good to see them named. And indeed, where we have place-based fora in number four, often they're led by the district council and should continue to be so, because they're good at it and we can join in. We're glad to see 6, and I know that Councillor Daunton was looking at it as well, and that is this enhancing officer member engagement. Ms Kennedy is well aware of how I felt when I didn't feel that I was being engaged with in Trumpington, and this has gone, we've got a better relationship now, I think. But this does need to be iterative and coming from both sides, and members also need to be better at getting in touch with one another across boundaries to make sure that we are delivering for our residents. I've got some suggestions to make through the member development panel on that one. I did want to just check that when we say in number 6 that we should enhance officer member engagement, I think we'll want some follow-up meat on those bones to see how it's working. One thing I have proposed is that the default for member training, especially as most of it is delivered online and on the record, so people who have got commitments during the day can still catch up. That membership should be by default to all members, which means that people, the poor benighted people who are not on this committee, can still find out what's going on. And that is very important, because COSMIC, I think, mirrors what happens at a higher level at strategy and partnerships, because it's really important that all members understand what's going on in other bits of the county, and reading these case studies and so on inspires us. I mean, I'm coming back to some of those in the libraries section, because when we find out what they do in somewhere else,
Can I just ask Philippa, is there a question here at all?
Not really. I'm taking advantage.
I think it would be really helpful if you could ask one.
I was making appreciative noises about Councillor
That's lovely, but I think we possibly need to either have a question or move on a little bit.
Okay, it probably belongs in what I'm going to say with the libraries. Thank you.
Your question is, don't you agree? I think is what you're correct. Thank you. Turn your microphone off if you could now. Thank you. Lucy.
Oh dear, I'm feeling under great pressure to be very fast and ask a question. I do have a question, but I've got a few things I want to say first. So the first things, I first of all want to respond to what Steve has just said. And I want to say 2 things. The first is that there are a number of members around this table and across this council who would not agree that everything was wonderful with the Innovate and Cultivate Fund. And there were certainly some issues with that programme, as well as some very good parts of it. And the second thing I want to say is that actually, at some level, I agree that some of the work on this did lose pace at the beginning of this administration, and with the change of administration, some of the effort that had gone into cross-boundary working wasn't kept up. Since then, I think there's been some really, really good work that's happened with these pilots. We are now about to go into another set of elections, and I would really like it if that pace was not lost as we move to whatever the new council looks like this time. And there's a lot of really good stuff in this report, which talks about how the whole council is going to move to much less siloed working, and we're going to have a whole council approach, and we're going to do lots of things through partnership. My slight worry is that if this becomes a whole council thing, it's very easy for the real detail of partnership working at a very, very local level to get lost. And my slight worry about what's in this proposal is that there isn't, I don't think, something coming back to this committee about it. And the impression I get from this report is that you're saying this is excellent stuff, and we're going to do more of it, and we want to do it across the whole council in some level, and therefore we'll kind of pass it over to the whole council, and it won't come back here. And as the person who leads the whole council, I am extremely painfully well aware of how easy it is for whole council stuff to get lost. And particularly, I think, looking a bit further forward and looking at what's going to happen with local government reform and all sorts of other things, it will be very easy for a lot of distraction to happen, and for the really, really good work that's been done here at a very small place-based level to get lost in the bigger picture. So actually, my request to this committee is that you keep asking for updates on how this is going, and you keep it on your agenda, because I think that the scrutiny of this committee over this work is really important. So I'm slightly going to leave it to Tom and Sue to work out how that happens. But my request is that actually you don't just say that was all great and hand it over. I think it's really important that this committee keep asking questions about it and keep checking on what progress is being made on that really local level of place-based working. So I think that's a question, and I think it's probably a question for you, Tom.
No, it's a good question. I was going to make a similar point. I think, how do we keep this going? Looking at the case studies, I thought are excellent. Some of them I knew a little bit about anecdotally, Huntingdon ones obviously, and seeing the difference that's made. And it's easier said than done, but I think we've got to try and keep momentum. I think Steve and Lucy have both agreed on the point that when there's a change or when there's a set of elections, there's new people, we do perhaps lose that momentum, and how do we just keep that going?
So in the table that Jess has put together in the cover papers, we've identified how this links into the Our Future strategy, which is about the way the council needs to change, which was approved as a council-wide strategy, strategy, resources and performance. But I think it's a really good point that we need to take away as officers about then where does the detail of the work of that strategy as it develops, where is that located within the committee structure, and how is that continued to be scrutinised and exposed and explored. And so I think it absolutely, whilst we've made that link to the strategy, and the detail of the implementation of that strategy is starting to get underway, particularly around the cross-cutting themes, and the place-based work sits within one of those cross-cutting themes, then I think that's it's a very useful comment and reflection for us to take away, to say how is that then located back into the committee structure. Thank you.
Thank you all. I've got Alex, then I've got Mark.
Thank you. So yes, I do agree on the question of how do we continue to keep the scrutiny. So having some regular updates, some form of reporting would be good to think about from now. The question I had is around how do we actually communicate what works, because ultimately from a resident point of view, I think some of the pilots, which are very helpfully detailed in the appendix, are very easy to understand in terms of, okay, what have we done and what impact it had. For example, the project around council tax in Huntingdon is like a very straightforward outcome, whereas from others, I can see how residents perhaps will struggle to maybe identify what actual tangible impact it made in the local community. So I think the question we have to ask is what has visibly changed day to day in how we support residents, or what will change in the future, and how do we communicate that with our communities. So for example, saying, well, now you can go to this library or this community space and not only access X or Y service, you can also access those other things, and having those tangible examples of what actually decentralization means in practice, because otherwise I do also relate to often, criticism around more policy-orientated papers that we often struggle to actually identify how to actually explain this to our residents, like on the doorstep, what decentralization actually means, what this, co-produced approach actually means in practice, and so on. So I'm really keen to think about how we do the communications around this, especially with those projects and strategies that we want to take forward, and in other areas as well. The question I had is around especially place-based forums and budgets, often involving local organizations, other local partners. I think it's I'm not expecting an answer now. It's like a higher level question in terms of how do we actually make this work sustainable over time, especially in those projects where we rely on local organizations with their local knowledge, who also face pressures, with fundraising, with costs, with unsustainable budgets of their own over time. And if we rely, which I think is good to, get involved with the local groups, with the local knowledge, but how do we refrain from putting too much work on them as well, by the same time benefiting from their local knowledge and create that sustainable work over time? Because I've seen many projects where people are really excited to participate the first couple of years, and then they face their own financial pressures and actually say, we can't really continue this work beyond. So and finally, on the third pilot, I thought it was really interesting. It does say that the work was not carried forward, but on simplifying referrals, I really think that is needed. However, back to Councillor Nzinga's point, I do think we have to wait till the local government reform discussions around it and not start something and then this whole structure changes. But I think that although that work didn't go ahead, that is really needed in terms of how people actually find services and so on. But we might have to wait a bit longer on that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody wish to respond? Yeah, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Just responding on the place-based forums and budgets. I mean, for me, this is an area that is hugely exciting and certainly feeds into all of the future council work. But in the here and now, as we enter the next financial year and as we enter budget setting, it's certainly something that the community service are keen to continue from within their allocated funds. So the place-based forums are gathering pace. They've had very much an internal focus, because that's where we actually recognise the bigger issues were. When we started Closer to Communities, I think we recognised that our outward-facing partnerships at a district level were stronger than what we had internally. So that was why we really pulled together across directorates people around a place. And I think that's created a really solid foundation for us to push forward on now. And the way that those budgets have been used, they are tiny amounts of money. But I think they've proven that a small amount of money, when everybody's in agreement about a local priority, can go a long way. It's not necessarily about a sustainability thing. It might be about kickstarting something. And so that's where we're really seeing that come to fruition. And that's something that will go into next year and beyond. And I think then it builds a platform potentially for more money to come in to a place-based budget if other service areas and across the council there's an appetite for us to do so.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
Thank you, Tom. Really interesting debate around what is quite an old subject. I sat and I got a little giggle to myself before I come to my question, that I used to be the vice chairman of the predecessor of this committee, and very proud to be so, and we did lots of good work, and I recognised what the leader has said, actually, that inertia did slow down, and maybe it looks in this report that things are heading in the right direction. But in answer to the leader's question to the committee leadership, I think I might have an answer for you, because what I don't see in the report, on top of a lot of good stuff, what I don't see in the report is what success would look like, future success would look like. And I think what would be a really good thing to come back to this report, into this committee, was if we had some officer and member involvement that said, okay, all of this good work should, by the middle of 2026, look like this, by the middle of 27, look like that, by the middle of 28, look like that. And then you can actually have a tangible discussion in this forum, officer and members, to discuss where you're at in relation to that. Why has it changed? Councillor Slatter brought up COVID. There could be another It's always on in my household, and I despise EastEnders. But every time I go into the room, there's kind of a warm and cuddly feeling because Phil's still in it, Kathy's still in it, and Ian Bill is still in it, right? And that's how I feel coming to this meeting. You know, it's the same discussion, and it's largely the same cast. But actually, I'm not sure we're ever going to get there. EastEnders won't get anywhere because that's not supposed to. This one could if we had some goals and targets to aim at.
I'm concerned you get a warm and fuzzy feeling from watching EastEnders. I mean, whenever I've watched it, which is very rarely, I normally come away thinking, my God, that's depressing. But I
The
think
fuzzy feeling is the fact that I don't live there.
you don't live in Walford. Well, that's something. Thank you. No, I saw a lot of nods, actually. I think you made a good point. I think we need to probably be ambitious, even if we don't meet some of those ambitious targets. But I had a lot of appreciation.
Then if I
think,
can,
when-
Tom, then understand why you're not meeting them. And that's the key. That's the key. Not saying, oh, we didn't meet and we failed by 30 seconds, 6%, 5%, whatever. Why did we not meet? Have that discussion, have that debate, members and officers around a table, and then move forward and reset again. That's what's lacking. That's a very good report, very interesting read, but that's what I felt was lacking.
The point, and I also wanted just to add to that, maybe we can have some case studies and people come to see us and tell us what their experience is. I've bumped into people that have said, oh, I got some help at the Conaghere Centre the other day because I happen to live not far from there, but I wouldn't know that and other members wouldn't, and I perhaps wouldn't know anecdotally what's happening in Claire's area or Ian's or someone like that. So can we perhaps just clarify where we go from here?
So thank you very much. And yes, there were lots of nods around the table. So I think certainly Lisa and I will take that away and look at how we can develop that. And maybe that is another member officer workshop that actually follows on from this to look at how we do some of that clarification around targets around the future. And also we'll have a think about involving participants as well. We did one of our earlier committees did have people to speak to some of the projects that they were involved in, and that really brought that activity to life. So we'll have a look at that as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, Ian, did you have your hand up? Do you want to make a point? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a very good report, but I think going forward, it should not only be this. Sorry, I'm too far away. I do apologise. I'll get closer. I think it's a very good report, but I do think we need to go further forward. And we also need to look at other committees when they're working with communities. Rather than imposing something on a community, they should be working with that community to come up with a solution. So I do think we ought to look at that more broadly and how we can work closer with our parish councils in trying to get jobs done more locally, you know, across the council, not just this committee, but across the council. So I do think if we could have various sort of like working groups or whatever looking at that and coming up with some schemes that we could look at going forward, that would be very beneficial. So I agree with what's been said to date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And you have experience of parish councils, don't you, as we know? Is it 25? 25, that's the figure. That's the figure. Claire.
Thank you for allowing me to come back again. So following quite neatly on from what Ian said, I agree with that, to try to work more closely with parish councils. And in relation to that, I think there might well be a resource input on the part of the county council, as well as with parish councils, in terms of training, because I think there may be needed some training at both ends in terms of how better to work with parish councils and maybe even financial training as well, if more pilots are going to be taken forward.
Okay, thank you. Anybody wish to comment from here? Are we noting?
And just to clarify, because the purpose of the pilots was to test out ways of working, and then obviously those ways of working have been articulated in the report that Jess has put together. What we really want to do is embed those ways of working and that learning and that approach in the way that we carry out, for want of a better term, our day job. So rather than perpetuating more pilots, to actually say, how does this change the way we do what we do on a day by day basis, which I think is the deeper challenge here about how we address and adjust the way we work as a council. And so Lisa said that often part of the things that we learnt was that our working externally with partners and collaborating with partners was effective, but we needed to look at how we collaborated across the organisation and between services. So we need to embed the learning from this into the way we do our day job. And that's not to say projects won't emerge from that. I'm sure they will. But obviously in terms of this succession of pilots, we want to close that down and then pick up the bigger challenge of transforming the way we work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions at all? Points from members? No. Lucy, sorry.
Just to say that I can raise this under the agenda plan, but my suggestion would be that the committee should ask for a report on this to come back to the first meeting of the new committee after the elections, in order to try and make sure that the kind of energy that there is about it now continues. So I think there's been a bit of a discussion about what that report might look like, and Sue and Lisa can take that away. But I think rather than that coming back to the next meeting, this committee in March, which will be just before the elections, it would probably be really good if it came back immediately after, so that the new committee can pick up as quickly as possible where it's been left, if that makes sense.
That's an excellent idea. Can we make sure that's included in our June meeting? Okay, so including that then, we have two recommendations: to note the contents of the report, which we've done, and to endorse the learning and considerations set out in section 6 of the report, which I'm satisfied that we've done. We won't include Councillor Goldsack's EastEnders reminiscences there. I mean, you're telling me Kathy's back in EastEnders? I can't believe I didn't know that. That's no, but that was very good. You put that extremely well there, Mark. Thank you. That was a very good suggestion. Also, thank you, Jess, for all your hard work as well and for coming today. It's greatly appreciated, and well done on running such a successful project. So thank you. And we'll go now on to item 6, which is the Cambridgeshire Registration Service Annual Report. That will be presented by the Service Director, Peter Gell. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm also accompanied today by Sarah Abbott, who's the Head of Service for Coroners and Registration. So the report is a reflection on the last 12 months service delivery. It focuses on a number of areas, so performance, ceremonies and appointments. It's just a few elements I'll pick out of the report. First of all, the external scrutiny is given by the General Registry Office, part of the Home Office. They scrutinise the annual performance, but performance on an ongoing basis. And we work really closely with the Regional Compliance Officer, and I think that's been really helpful as a critical friend for the service to explore best practice, to understand what other authorities are doing. I think many of the aspects of the delivery of this service are things that there is only one way to do it. It's either right or it's wrong, and that's because of the legal nature around aspects of registration. Over the last 12 months, we've delivered over 2,000 ceremonies. It's pretty much 50-50 as far as those within our own facilities and those in approved venues, and that's quite a number when we look across the county, and just a demonstration of how busy in general we are. What's really been pleasing is the Cambridgeshire Quality of Life Survey, which found for 2024 a satisfaction rate of 85% for the service, which is 1% higher than last year and is joint highest for this council. Clearly, that's a great benchmark in place and a good starting point. We're not complacent, and there's clearly always room for improvement, and we continue to strive for that. In addition, we undertake customer surveys, and that's really important to get direct feedback from those that use our services. One of the areas where we have had some really positive feedback is in relation to the ceremonies that we conduct. We scored a 5 out of 5 in how we registrars on the day. And to me, that's really important because they can make a real difference between something that makes it a really special day for those couple or something which is a bit of a letdown, bear in mind it's a big event. And this really shows sort of the empathy and the council values that are shared by those staff at delivering those ceremonies. And the overall experience in general with those is good. Where there are areas for improvement in relation to ceremonies, is we could do better in relation to the facilities that we provide. some of the maintenance around those, and we're working closely with colleagues in our properties team in relation to that, just making sure that we keep those facilities in as good a condition as we can, and we always exploring opportunities, certainly as population grows for other locations around the city going forward. Looking at sort of performance in areas of sort of the registration aspects of it, members would be very aware we had some challenges earlier in the year in relation to registrations of deaths, and we talked previously about that, partly around software, partly about resourcing. What I'm pleased to say is that performance in that area is significantly improved. And what we reported within the report was an 81% that's registered within 5 days. What I can say now, we've just this week looked at the Q3 figures, and that has now gone up to 85%. So a vast improvement in where we were earlier in the year. And also, as far as registrations of births within the 42-day time requirement, we were at 83% as reported in the report. Q3 is now at 97%. So again, we've made sort of good progress in that respect. As a sort of reflection on the ceremonies, one of the things that we have done this year is put in place what we call bespoke ceremonies. So these have just moved also outside the pure statutory ceremony. It's a statutory ceremony also with other elements, typically the areas that celebrants would operate in. And we've done this for a number of reasons. One, if there is a landscape change and they do open up, if you like, the market relations from the ceremonies that we provide, then we've actually got an area where we've already ventured out and we've already got a foot in that market. And also with from feedback from those that use our services, we know there's a demand for it. So we have put ourselves in that area. It has been well received, and it's an area we continue to grow going forward. And this is an area that will bring an additional revenue into the service. Within citizenships, again, they continue to be on a large scale operated out of New Shire Hall, and again, there's a continued demand coming for those. We also offer smaller scale ceremonies for those that want a more intimate citizenship ceremony, and those again have proved popular. Regards to our approved venues, it has been a challenging climate. So these are external venues that we approve. So these are outside of our own facilities. The numbers actually themselves, as far as the venues, have held up well. We had another 7 new venues in the past year. What they have seen, though, is a drop off in the demand for those venues, and that's not the case of the more numbers has reduced the demand. It's still the financial climate, and people are finding it difficult in some cases to afford ceremonies in those venues that they would have had otherwise. We have, as a result, picked up some of those ceremonies in our own facilities. We don't make some of the overheads that they will with some of the offerings that they have, but we have found alternatives for those couples that wanted to still continue with the ceremony during this period, but weren't able to afford what they wanted to. Number of areas that we've focused on as far as changes through the years. So we had death certification reforms. These are national legislative changes that impact both on the registration and the coroner's service and how the processing, if you like, is handled, and that's been implemented well across Cambridgeshire. There's a lot of work went in prior to the legislative changes, very much with our partners and the medical examiners. It requires, again, we talked about partnership earlier today in many of the conversations, but it really is key. The success is working well with colleagues, finding out where the challenges are, and working those through, and that has been a success. We are expecting to see continued change nationally in relation to increased use of technology on the registration side, and these will be elements rolled out to all local authorities to use in inputting information. Locally, we do have ambitions to, again, look at the software that we currently use that enables customers to book online. There's always opportunities to improve that, make it more customer friendly, more intuitive. We're also offering the ability for those that want to continue with inquiries themselves online to be able to speak to someone. So this isn't a case of taking things away, but trying to enhance what we've got as far as management of information and requests, and people being able to self-help as well going forward. I suppose as far as the future, we've talked about the system changes, probably national changes in relation to IT, continue to develop the bespoke ceremonies, but also workforce development. So with Sarah Abbott here in post, we do have opportunities now to look at some of the synergies around the coroners and registration services. Also, the certification reforms provide opportunities because of the changes in the requirements there to look again at how we resource some elements, and through that, and looking at some of the historical silos that exist within the way registration services are typically structured across local authorities, where you have registration teams and ceremony officers. What we're wanting to do, because clearly there are peaks and troughs within those, we want to make sure that we're developing those staff where possible to be able to work across those, and then again that adds more resilience. It enables us to have probably a leaner workforce in total, but it doesn't put officers at risk, but it just allows us to be more flexible. And I think that's one of the challenges that we found earlier in the year when we talked about death certification processing sort of death certifications within the time scales. It is a fact that we didn't have that resilience in place, so this will really help us going forward. So this is quite a quick fly through from the report. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions, Claire?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the report. Can I just clarify, the Ely Register Office is actually in the Archives Office? That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. So there are two mentions of it, two separate mentions of it. One is where you talk about the decking and the backdrop, and I'm very familiar with the location, and it's not a brilliant backdrop. I think we've spoken about this before, and the report makes that clear. It's not, and it really needs to be improved. And then it also comes up again under section 3.2.9 in relation to accommodation and the outbreak of mould there. And I should declare a separate interest because I'm also on the County Archives and Local Studies Group, so I have a particular interest in care for the archives. And I really want to be sure that that venue goes on being a suitable place. And also the knock-on effect of that for the archive service, and that's the principal focus of that location. And I see the county archivist is sitting in the room as well. Thanks.
Yes, clearly there's quite a lot of demand for accommodation for different uses, and as you're very much aware as a committee, there's a sort of wider review being taking place in relation to the assets that we have to ensure that those that we have are sort of fit for purpose, but also releasing those that we no longer need. And clearly, as a service, we've got a co-location at that facility. From a registration perspective, then we could have better facilities as far as that which would work for couples. We also need to bear in mind growing populations, what those demands look like in future. And there's a number of things we are constantly looking at. One is the use of those facilities. Where are people travelling from? So looking at the population, looking at where people are travelling from, looking at how technology changes. So again, if through landscape changes, there is a lesser requirement for people to physically go into offices, that will reduce demand. If that doesn't come into place, or that takes a number of years, then the population demand may mean we need new premises prior to that. What we have been for some time is looking with property colleagues for other localities within the Ely area specifically to do that, both within our own portfolio of assets, but outside of that. To date, we've not identified anything suitable, but always happy to consider anything that any members are aware of that becomes available, and we will continue to look. So at the moment, we're trying to make the best of a co-location. We need to make sure it works for both services, and I think we're doing that at the moment. But ideally, we'd have something different, but we are where we are at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the explanation. And to be positive, I mean, thank you very much for the report, which is a great report.
Thank you. We have Philippa, followed by Henry.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And it is a question. 3.1.7, followed by a reference to Ely. In terms of having partners, Are there any partnerships with the district councils who often have rather splendid buildings, you know, with good staircases for photographs and that sort of thing? Do we have any arrangements whereby we could have a more modest or affordable wedding for couples if they're prepared to be number 3 in a line of 6 or something like that? Not all at once, not a Mooney job, but we could actually have that economies of scale. Our registrars could be there, could do a day with a whole lot of registrations. Is that something we offer, particularly thinking of council venues? Thank you. District council venues.
As far as options, we do offer an array of ceremonies anyway for the venues that we have at different pricing points to suit couples. So I think those options are there at the moment. As far as working with colleagues and other authorities, this morning we've had a conversation with a colleague here, Sarah Abbott, around inquiries with another district actually in relation to exploring whether they've got facilities available for one of our other services. So again, we're open to talking to districts. There are no barriers in having those conversations, and if we've got facilities that can work for both parties, and we know a number of local authorities like ourselves have got assets that they're not to be able to make full use of at the moment. So yes, absolutely, it's something we are proactively looking at.
Okay, thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I remember from previous iterations of this report that we've had that I think because of mainly COVID, I think there's quite a big backlog in some of the registrations. I just wanted to ask, one, am I remembering that right? And two, how are we getting on with it, if so?
Yes, absolutely. That was the case. We fared better than, I would say, most authorities at the time, because we were able to keep our services running to the extent that was possible where a number had shut down. So we have absolutely recovered from the backlog that we had at the time. It did take a number of authorities probably another 18 months to get to the same position that we were. But again, it is very much around the business continuity, sort of resilience planning going forward, and that's something we're very keen to make sure we have in place for a number of contingencies. Clearly, the pandemic was one that no one had quite planned for in that way, but we did at the outset look at it and looked at how we could keep our services running. But you're absolutely right in relation to your memory in that respect.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions at all? Mark.
Just a quick one, coming back on the Ely one, as a quick look around the room. I'm actually chair of East Cams, and we've got a lovely staircase that you wouldn't want to be photographed on, to be perfectly honest with you. It's just not a suitable building for, in my opinion, for a wedding. And I come at that through the lens of a father whose daughter has now announced having got a 6-month-old baby. They now consider that getting married is probably a good idea. So we're now looking for wedding venues. But what that lead me to think, and just so that I understand this, your third-party venues, when you're licensing them, do you provide the actual marriage service, the legality part for them, and then they provide the entertainment? Is that something that we could look to expand in Ely to maybe offer Ely-based residents? And
absolutely. At the moment, the venues approach ourselves largely in respect of wanting to become an approved venue, often as a way of supplementing revenue for their business operations. As I say, we had 7 new venues this year. We do also attend wedding fairs, and what we have found in the past is through promoting our services at wedding fairs, we've had venues approach us following that, seeking to become approved. So absolutely, we could increase if there's appropriate businesses in that area that would like to become approved, and then we're very happy to go through the process with them.
Well, if we've got an ongoing issue with provision due to the mould and etc., then there's certainly venues around there. The old school in Stuntney with the fantastic views over the thing. I mean, they do their weddings and they've probably got a celebrant market doing it, but there may be an interest in there to a non-celebrant market.
Yeah, very happy to continue to explore those, and that's one of the reasons, as I say, we've also launched those bespoke zones, because we are proactively looking at ways that we can meet that need, and then we are sort of flexible in that respect.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question of fact and actually checking my memory. We normally get, perhaps not with this report, the quarterly reports, KPIs on performance. And I just wonder how we're doing with registration, less cheerful subject than before, the registration of deaths, particularly in cases of religious groups who require burial pretty quickly after the death has occurred, subject to obviously the normal constraints. So are we on top of that?
Yes, so the data comes on the performance reports. You're absolutely right, it's reported regularly. We do have provisions that I'll ask my colleague actually to talk about in relation to religious phase deaths, and then obviously a lot of that's managed through our coronial service, but we do offer over and above what others do in that respect. So if you'd like to add some further content, Sarah, thank you.
Thank you. So we cover the faith deaths with the coroner service presently, so we don't have an out of hours coverage for registrations because it's not needed. I am having conversations with colleagues in other part of the country where they're not able to do that provision within registrations, so that they too can tap into the coronial resource and give that coverage elsewhere. So we do a really, really good job here, but it is covered within coroners and not within registrations.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No? Well, thank you very much, both of you, for that. We know the contents of the report, and thank you for answering all those questions. And now I think we go straight to you again for item 7, which is the Trading Standards Annual Report. You're leaving us, are you, Sarah? Is that right? Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just invited my colleague Hilary Gilbert, who's the Business Compliance Manager within Trading Standards as well with me. So again, we have the report, again, reflection in this case in Trading Standards on the past 12 months. A number of areas just wanted to, again, highlight from this. So in respect of trading standards breaches, this is the criminal legislation that Trading Standards enforce. The main areas that, or sectors that we get complaints about are the sort of the transport area, which is car sales and servicing, housing, so the home improvements and appliances and general personal goods and services. And when you break that down into legislative areas, it's things like fair trading, which is your pricing and descriptions of goods, your contract terms, your consumer rights, food standards, which would cover sort of allergens and that aspect, animal welfare and disease control. And we've obviously got animal health diseases within that setting, age-restricted sales, consumer product safety, which again is an area with, as a council, we had a focus on in relation to a sort of motion on lithium-ion batteries, should I recall, and doorstep crime. I suppose before to talk about local delivery, just a bit of a view on what we can expect going forward. So you'll be aware of sort of the age-restricted sales in relation to vapes, sort of legislative controls that government will be introducing. So there'll be responsibilities for the trading standards in relation to enforcement of those restrictions. The Food Standards Framework, which is a framework that the Food Standards Agency, the national regulator, oversees, that lays down how both county councils in delivery of food standards and district councils in delivery of food safety, how they deliver their services and how they work. That framework is changing, and that will place different requirements on us as a service going forward, and the way we approach that work. The protect duty is something that we've sort of reported on before, that we had kept an eye on. It's in relation to anti-terrorism prevention. The legislation hasn't really progressed at present, and though we do know now that as a local authority we won't be the regulator, we'll be a national regulator. So this is very much around venues and events and the measures and risk assessments that have to be in place in those settings. As certainly a provider of accommodation and our own facilities, we will have requirements in that respect in relation to our own portfolio of property, and I do meet regularly with our property team and communities leads to talk about both protect and prevent on sort of a monthly basis. Funeral directors, I just wanted to again just highlight this, so you recall around what was in the media quite a few months ago now, nationally, with some cases around dignity of the deceased and also mis-selling of sort of funeral plans. So this is an area which were asked under the previous national government, started some inquiries asking at a local level through sort of training standards of environmental health colleagues to undertake some inquiries at funeral directors within their areas to obtain information that ultimately will help inform a sort of public consultation. So what I'm informed is that the current government are also, as the last, were committed to legislation in this respect. It's currently unregulated, and I think what we will see is the information that's been gathered by sort of local authorities will inform the consultation in relation to legislation that will come out in the future. Clearly, we've got particular links as well with our funeral directors through our coronial services, and we're very sort of confident in the services that those that we contract with provide. And there were no particular concerns highlighted through this exercise because it's something we work closely with our district environmental health sort of colleagues in gathering of this data. It was reported back nationally. I've got a note on here in relation to our in-law. So again, we're keeping very much an eye on sort of allergen requirements, and also there's continued push for legislation in relation to non-pre-packed goods. We're promoting best practice in that through the inspections and the work that we do. Very conscious really that what we'll want to do going forward is sort of gathering information from businesses to help us understand what they might perceive as any barriers to present that information. And I think talking to a colleague here, Hilary, today, who manages the teams that deliver that, certainly it is quite a complex area for some businesses, and I think that it's the concerns not around the principle of complying, but understanding and understanding how best to do that, and we're trying to help them through that. And then another area where again there's a push for legislative change, and I mentioned earlier in relation to the council motion, and this is going around lithium-ion batteries and e-bikes and imports of goods into the UK that don't actually go for a UK wholesaler. We do have continued concerns in relation to that, and there are, as I say, some clear proposals nationally, if enacted, would bring some safeguards in that respect. So locally, areas where we have a particular focus of things like underage sales, again, illicit sales, very much links into the public health agenda as well, and health inequalities. We do find a lot, and this is a national issue, there are a lot of illicit sales of vapes, I'm afraid to say, and so legislative reform, I think, is very much sort of needed in that respect. Animal welfare is also something we spend very time on, both responding to sort of welfare concerns of things like livestock, but also working with the farming community around biosecurity. So this is trying to prevent animal health diseases spreading. Clearly, this can be hugely detrimental to the farming community. And we've had this year alone nationally sort of problems around blue tongue. There are some cases around avian flu at the moment across the country. There are some restrictions in certain parts of the country, and I think that they are in Norfolk, in fact. What we're seeing at the moment is a migration sort of period. So some of the cases that we are seeing are not in the sort of the kept bird population. It's in sort of the wildlife. So we have got sort of nationally, the birds are being tested to sort of monitor where they are, where that's happening. We've mentioned earlier about food safety, and again, continued focus, particularly around things like allergens, and we'll make sure clearly as the new food framework comes into place that we're doing what we need to do in order to meet those requirements. Always working closely in relation to any product safety concerns, both with a national regulator, the Office of Product Safety and Standards. In relation to e-bikes and batteries, we undertook some work in the last couple of months, supporting them as did other local authorities, visiting any businesses within their area that modify bikes or sell sort of electric bikes, because it's the modification of bikes and batteries that tend to present the problem, or imports of batteries that have not come through a recognised retailer. Again, also working closely with ports of entry into the UK, where consignments have left those ports with potential areas of concern into our county, and we will visit those warehouses and in order to make sure those goods
Just
are
conscious
safe.
of time, Peter, and just
Yeah.
wondered if we could at this stage. Thank you very much for your
Yeah.
reporting
Yeah.
there. We could perhaps go to some questions at this point. Claire, thank you.
Yes, actually, it's in 3.1.16. In that paragraph, there's two really interesting points that you make there. One is about the new growth in industry and insect protein. I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about that. And then also in the same paragraph, the service has also become recognised for its expertise on age verification software. And maybe you could say a little bit more about that. I presume, well, the first point you do mention it's working with the university. The second area, the age verification software, is that also working with the university?
No, so this is a reflection of the work that we do with a number of national businesses that pay us for their business advice. Clearly, as a commercial entity, what they're looking to do is to either find efficiencies themselves or to find opportunities in a market, or sometimes try and find what areas of clarity in relation to great aspects of legislation. So these are just two aspects of quite novel areas, if you like, where we've had them come to us seeking advice in relation to those. So yeah, one is linking in with the university, the other isn't. Another area recently was in relation to the freezing point, which we recommended for freezers and things at home. Historically, apparently the point at which we recommended freezers to be at was not set for any particular scientific reason. It was a figure produced, and clearly there's a lot of work around that now, because if that figure can be reduced, it's safer for the environment. If the freezing, so there are quite a lot of those sort of areas that come up on a regular basis. So it's a very specialised team that sits within training standards that looks at those aspects, and in some cases we'll be also seeking guidance from and views from government departments and other experts. So in food in particular, a member of the team sits as part of a national expert group and panel on food and food elements.
Thank you. Anybody else at all? Jeff.
Thank you, Chairman. Peter, to some extent, you have preempted the question that I was going to ask, but I'm going to ask it just the same. Allergens information. You've now been progressing the best practice advice. Have you encountered any very strong resistance to this? Have people, businesses, absolutely refused to do it? And in brief, what sort of problems have emerged? This may be part of a longer discussion, of course, but.
Thank you. I think it's more about a concern as to how they're able to provide accurate information on an ongoing basis to their customers, really, given substitution of ingredients. And we're also very doing a lot of work in terms of making sure people are understanding not just their legal obligations and best practice, but also what's in the food that they're actually selling to their customers, whether that's food they're making themselves by buying in raw ingredients, or whether that's pre-packed, pre-prepared products such as condiments. There isn't necessarily that understanding that they need to be conscious and look at labelling and look at the information that's provided to them for them to then provide it on to their customers in a way that's accurate. So I think it's more of a concern as to how they're going to be able to keep up, really, I think is probably the best way to put it, given some of the changes that if they're, particularly with sort of the costs at the moment, if they're buying different ingredients on a fairly regular basis, they're printing material, how they're able to keep up with making sure that it's accurate so that they're not causing any issues for their customers.
Okay, does that answer your question, Jeff?
It does. I think there's quite a number of different aspects of it, but I don't think we should go into it all. Perhaps I may take it up if I can separately.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any further questions at all or comments on this? No? Well, thank you very much to both of you for attending and for the thoroughness of your updates. Appreciate it. So we're going to now move on to item 8, which is the Library Service and Archive Service Annual Report. We're going to hear a presentation from Head of Libraries Gary Porter and Library Support Services Manager Andrew Stotter and the Archives and Local Studies Manager Alan Ackroyd. And we don't have a question from Mr. Carpen, but we'll have questions from members, I'm sure. Thank you.
So good afternoon again. So this report provides the committee with an annual update on the activities and performance of the services in 2024, highlighting achievements and initiatives, as well as providing a narrative on the direction of travel.
Gary, I don't think we can hear you too well if you can pull the microphone.
Okay.
Members, I just realised, of course, it's 4 p.m. So I think what we'll do is we'll hear the presentation, we'll have a brief break, and then we'll come back for questions if that's acceptable. So if you could do a presentation and then we'll pause and go to questions.
I'll start again for clarity and hearing. So the report is an annual update on the activities and performance of the services in 2024, highlighting achievements and initiatives, as well as providing a narrative on the direction of travel of the services and the ways in which they're meeting both community needs and the needs of communities and the priorities of the council. Apologies. So updates are provided on a number of projects and initiatives, including performance, Every Space, Every Child a Member, Know Your Neighbourhood, Green Libraries, the Europe Challenge, the Summer Reading Challenge, and the Library Presents. In addition, the Library Plus programme is outlined, and this will be a service focus in 2025. Capital investment to improve library buildings and the development of a new library strategy, which will position the service to further meet the needs of the council and communities. I'm not going to talk in detail to each section, but I do want to highlight some salient points which I think illustrate both the success and the relevance of the service. Beginning with performance, I think we operate in the attention economy. So the library service remains a mass participation service with circa 100,000 people using their library card in the last 12 months, generating 1.5 million visits. And we are, I'm glad to say, on track to hit a target of 4% growth on the performance of the previous year. Moving on to Every Space, phase 1 has been successfully delivered at March Library to great acclaim. Combining technology with design and furniture flexibility, this is a unique facility in Finland. In November 2024, we partnered with 2020 Productions for a program to support young people in learning and developing digital skills. Phase 2 will be developed at Cambridge Central in the summer of 2025. Every Child a Member. Early engagement with reading and libraries feeds through to educational attainment for children later in their lives, as well as contributing to well-being. Our Every Child a Member pilot in Wisbech encouraged more children and their families to join the library and saw a 170% increase on the number of new members for the comparable period in 2023. This was also reflected in figures for participation in the Summer Reading Challenge, a 22% increase on 2023. And phase 2 of the pilot will be delivered in Huntingdon in 2025. Green Libraries and Net Zero. A new action plan has been developed to encompass contributions from libraries, skills, and communities. In this area, the role of the library as a trusted source of accurate information is important. Working with partners, a successful program has been delivered, including eco-fairs, nature talks, eco-crafts, and repair cafes. The Europe Challenge, Meet, Eat, Art, is an initiative run by the European Cultural Foundation that brings together libraries and communities. Through food and culture, this wonderful program brought together families seeking sanctuary at the Cambridge Bar Hill Hotel with the wider community. This was a fantastic achievement which made a huge impact on everyone involved, and we have put it forward for a national recognition at the Libraries Connected Awards this summer. Know Your Neighbourhood. This government-funded pilot program in Finland aims to boost volunteering and help people connect with others in disadvantaged areas. Outcomes include surveying communities to find out what kinds of activities people would attend, running community cafes, including one at Chatteris, which saw 800 people visit the library over a 2-day period. Other activities to connect people include a dementia group, gardening friends, a program focused on drama and wellbeing for adults, a retro gaming club. And developing local partnerships has been key to the success of that project. Moving to the Library Presents, 2024 was another successful year for our arts program, which brings high-quality culture to new audiences across the county through our library network. Data on the spring 24 season indicated 43% of participants were attending for the first time. Ticket sales increased in the autumn season. In the context of the council's green priorities, 16 of the 46 spring season events were badged with the green leaf logo, highlighting activities with environmental themes. And the good news is that the service has been invited by the Arts Council to apply for a further year of funding, which would take us up to March 2027. Care Together. The library service is actively supporting the Care Together programme. Libraries have a great deal to offer older people to help them remain happy and healthier at home for longer, including digital inclusion, social connection, dementia support, signposting to other services, and cultural opportunities. Looking to 2025, we will be launching a membership drive targeted at people aged 60 plus. Library Plus. This capital investment of 1.3 million will help the library service to unlock the potential of buildings, adaptations and improvements, which will enable increased partnership and service delivery opportunities. This in turn will help the service meet local needs and expand access to services and facilities. This evolving approach will be articulated through a new strategy for the library service in 2025. In terms of the capital programme of investment, we have Andrew who's leading on that. So do you want to say a few words, Andrew?
Just quickly to say that the appendices you'll find attached sort of really shows we're trying to link with existing investments. So you've got the Section 106, One Public Estate work, NHS work pods, FM maintenance. So we're trying to make sure that we're combining all the work around the council and the investment in buildings to try and achieve that sort of value for money. So most notably, we're delivering work at Yaxley as we speak, an area that hasn't had much developer funding. And we've been able to work with property and the maintenance work and then add this funding to increase accessibility, adding public toilets and improving that offer.
Thank you. So just to conclude the presentation, I'd like to invite Alan, who's our archives professional lead, to talk to the archives section.
Thank you. Very briefly, in addition to all the day-to-day activities which the Archive Service has been doing, in this report you'll see some of the areas where we've been trying to push ourselves into doing new things. The first thing is our work in the education area, especially with primary age school children, where we're trying to convey the importance that history is not something which happens out there to other people, but they themselves are part of history. So all of these sessions also involve documents relating to the history of their school and their village. And we've also been working very closely with Cambridge University students and Regional College students as well. We've also been working with community groups on the Kimbolton Local History Society project, cataloguing the records of the Dukes of Manchester of Kimbolton. Thanks to funding from the Kimbolton Local History Society, the Cambridgeshire Family History Society and the Huntingdonshire Local History Society. We've also seen the publication of the NHS Infected Blood inquiry report, which we spent a great deal of time on working with the legal team for that inquiry a few years ago. And we've also been spending time cataloguing the records of Cambridgeshire County Council itself, something which we have slightly neglected over the years, but we have now catalogued the vast majorities of the committees and the subcommittees from 1974 onwards, and that's already paid dividends in improving our service to democratic services and other members and officers of the County Council.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much to all three of you. Now, I probably should have called for a break just before we came to this item, because I'm conscious officers and the members have been at this for 2 hours. So what I propose we do is we just break for 10 minutes and then we come back and ask questions if that's acceptable, and then everyone can have a break and we can reconvene then if that's acceptable. So we'll come back at 4:20. Thank you. Right, hello again, everybody. Let's resume. We've had a presentation, and thank you very much for agreeing to a 10-minute break there. We'll now go to questions. I think, Bryony, you have one, is that right? No, let me just check. Nick, the public question, gentleman's not here, is he? So
No, that's correct, Chair. But he'll receive a written response.
there'll be a written response. Here's the first question.
Thank
Right,
you, Chair, and you won't be surprised I'll be asking about the reopening of Cherry Hinton Library, which closed in April 2023. It looked finished in the summer, and I know that we put books into the library in the summer. I've lost count of the number of possible opening dates that have been discussed. I know there were some remedial safety issues with the entrance steps and ramps, but these have been completed. Can I ask what's holding up the opening of Cherry Hinton Library, and when my residents can start to use the lovely looking but currently still closed facility in Cherry Hinton, please?
Thank you for the question. Thought for the benefit of the wider committee, it'd be useful to contextualise where we're at. So, as you say, initially Cherry closed in April 23. That was a timeline to help the city in terms of its planning and building consent. The build was scheduled to finish in June 24. The library service booked to install early July 24. The city was able to work with the county to provide a temporary licence to occupy that would allow us to install and fit out the library, which happened in September 2024. In the meantime, the city, county, and the Community Benefit Society have been engaged with lease negotiations and a procurement exercise for a management agent. The procurement from the City Council has been challenging, but it was completed last week. This means that the final information will be available to complete the lease between the county and the city imminently. I attended a meeting yesterday on site with the city and the management agent, and an opening date of early February has provisionally been agreed. The library is continuing to work with Community Benefit Society on our own service level agreement, and we hope, because we're hoping to extend opening hours through that means once the cafe is open and the meeting room offer is on board. And then our intention would be for a formal launch of the centre in June 2025.
Does that answer your question, Bryony? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Claire.
I do have two questions myself, but I didn't actually quite hear the end of what you said. So if you wouldn't mind, just repeat.
I'll just repeat. So, yeah, so I attended a meeting with the city and the management agent yesterday on site, and we provisionally agreed an opening date of early February. And subsequent to that, the library is continuing to working with the Community Benefit Society on our own service level agreement, because we need that with them in order to ensure that we get the additional opening hours, which will be enabled through the Community Benefit Society, the cafe offer, and so on. And we will be working towards a formal launch of the centre in June 2025.
Thank you very much, Gary. Do you have questions, other
Yeah,
questions
I
for the
have two
public?
questions. Yes, thank you. First of all, on the library service. So thank you very much for the report. And thank you also, and thank you to Bryony for asking the question about Cherry Hinton Library, because that also affects library users in my division, which is the adjacent division of Fulbourn. So the question really relates to the Fulbourn Library, which is a community managed library. And your report doesn't cover the community managed libraries and the relationship of those two to the library service. And for example, the responsibility for renewing book stock in community managed libraries. So could you say a little bit more about the relationship between the library service and community managed libraries, and maybe in future possibly including a note or two on those in the annual report? I was very pleased to see the section on the Library Presents, which of course is going very well, and we hope there'll be future funding for that. In relation to the archive service, I think it's really rather important to point out that it is a separate statutory service. It's listed in the report under Care Together, but it is actually a separate statutory service, isn't it? I'm correct in that. It's a standalone. Every county council is required to have a separate statutory service.
Thank you. Yeah, just in terms of where it sits within the report, it isn't linked to Care Together. It's just the way the paragraphs are set out. It is separate. Both the library service and archive sit under myself. So I think traditionally there hasn't been a tradition of annual reports on the archive service coming to committee. Introduced it in 2024, and subsequently, in terms of thinking about sort of agenda pressures, we made the decision to combine the two into one report, but not intended to be a sort of diminution of the importance of archives. And then going forward, that's a matter for wider consideration. In terms of the community managed libraries, they are a valuable part of the library offer within the county. They are separate from us in the sense that they're not part of the statutory service. They have quite a long history. What we've done, actually, we realized that the relationship needed some attention. So in the last 12 months, we've renewed all of the SLAs and updated all of the SLAs with all of them, which has been really helpful because some of the personnel have changed. So it was a kind of reset moment in terms of our relationship with them. And obviously part of the SLA sort of stipulates our reciprocal responsibilities. So we provide training, we provide access to the library management system and so on. So I think there has been a really positive and helpful reset with them. But obviously there are issues that occur from time to time with individual ones, whether it might be a basis. But so that's essentially where we're at with the community managed libraries. And thank you for the kind comments about the Library Presents. I know how supportive of you are, obviously as chair, and emotionally invested in it as well as professionally. So, and I'm hugely proud of that. And obviously, it's wonderful that we've got the additional year's funding. Just to say, another priority for this year will be reapplying to the Arts Council for another tranche, a third tranche of funding, which we will need to be working on this year. Thank you.
I would like to come back on the archive service, if that's all right, because I think one of the things that goes on in the background, of course, is the County Archives and Local Studies Group, which is a county council group with representatives from districts as well. And when we meet, we always have a really good comprehensive report on the archive service and on all the huge range of things that goes on, which Alan has mentioned in his presentation before the break. And I have wondered in the past whether sometimes it would be appropriate to bring a report from that group to this committee. I mean, it's no longer a formal group, but it's good to see it working right across the county and the range of organisations that are involved in it.
Is that something we want to note for a future reference?
Thank you, Chair. Certainly, we can take that away. I think it's probably something that perhaps if there's already reports that are going to the group, we could consider circulating electronically by email to all members.
Thank you. That's great. Anybody else on the library service? Philippa.
It's almost a question. I just want to say how impressed I am by the team's ability to plug into funding wherever they may find it. 3.7 and 3.8 make this clear, but it's what we're doing with that funding when they identify and secure it. The 3.8.3, I think, identifies something we are well aware of. We open up services, we advertise as best we can, and it is discouraging when there's slow take up. And I just wanted to recommend that officers can be honest with us. We have all tried to lay on events that get a minimal response and things like that. We know it's difficult to get volunteers. So where our teams have done their very, very best and kept going, and it may not have turned out too well, it's best to read about that. Maybe I'm reading too much between the lines. The fact that you've, where are we? Did make a note on the text, but it doesn't matter, that you made a reference to the usefulness of leaflets. actual paper ones. And it would be quite good to know if you've been able to identify there were people who would otherwise have been excluded, perhaps they don't go online in the right way, who from taking advantage of that. I've made a big thing of making our repair cafe have a phone number, for example. If we've got examples, I think we do need to share those just county-wide, council-wide, to know the problems of digital exclusion. So that was one thing. The other thing is 3.10.2, Care Together, plus the library at home, is it seems to be having a resurgence. We've got some locally, they're nice new sort of Hessian bags with the printing on the side. And I'm wondering if we can reach people who don't have the benefit of living near Clay Farm. We are very much blessed. How are we getting out into the country? And maybe the library at home is good. And I wonder if we're linking in with social prescribers in terms of knowing who to visit. And because libraries are able to be the shop window, as it were, for a lot of the county council services, and we're back to this caring for communities and reaching out to everybody, are you making contacts through the health service to publicise not just books and libraries and tapes, but also other things that the county council can offer? Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot there. I'll try and unpick some of it. I think on the sort of communication, and you mentioned leaflets, we do know that they're very effective. So for instance, in 2023, we run the customer impact survey in libraries, and we were asking people, how do you find out about the service or the services? And actually people mentioned leaflets. We know from the Library Presents context that the brochure that we produce is really powerful tool in terms of marketing and advocacy. And because of that, what we're doing now, or on the verge of doing, is we're about to launch this year our membership drive for the over 60s. And so we secured funding for a leaflet that talks about the library offer that's QR coded, so that anyone picking it up anywhere will be able to scan the code and through, or come into a library in person, obviously. So we actually, we're a great believer in the physical asset as a way to communicate about the service. And interestingly, in terms of, okay, you've got the leaflet, how do you get it out there? That is a challenge. We do use volunteers. We've just about tomorrow to submit a micro grant to Arts Council for I think it's £5,000, which we're going to use that money, if we're successful, to get boots on the ground in order to deliver the membership drive leaflet out into the community. So we do recognise that. But there is a dependency on things like funding like that. We've got our volunteers and partners. I mean, through the place-based forums, we're really keen that the membership drive is not perceived as a library project, but it's a project that can bring benefit, to the wider community, and looking to colleagues who work with, in this instance, 60+ cohorts to do promotion for us. Were there other things there?
It was plugging into what the social prescribers know. We can tell them what we know, and they can tell us what I know. And it's not just older people, of course, it's people who are housebound for other reasons.
Yeah, definitely the library at home service has engagement with social prescribers. I think it's one of those areas we do find they have a high turnover, so it's one that we regularly return to. So we do meet with the social prescribers, give an update on the service and the service offer. The other one would be things like the mobile offer. So if we often have volunteers who'll pick up the home library offer from the mobile to then deliver in their village, that sort of thing as well. So we are able to get closer to the volunteers, to the area. And of course, the mobile often visits places like care homes and can park very close to the front door, giving that real close access to people who want to still come out and browse themselves, but where that mobility is limited. So
justifies just one mobile library van, isn't it, too, as well?
Just one additional thing to add. I mentioned the commitment under Care Together for the membership drive. Another commitment we have under that is to expand both the number of volunteers and the number of recipients of the Libraries at Home service. So, yeah, again, taking the message out to people who cannot get into the library.
Okay, thank you very much. Mark.
Yeah, thank you for a comprehensive report. Two questions or comments that come out of it. One, repair cafe use in library circumstances. Have you or could you map onto the men sheds that are in the area? There's a really good and growing common link between the two, and they both really help tackle an awful lot of unstated things in terms of mental health, particularly in men. They're very good. I know there's a good link between the one in Salem and the Salem Library, but I'm just asking that to see that elsewhere. The second point was in the dialogue. I can't find it in the notes, but in the dialogue, one of you gentlemen mentioned you've got 100,000 Cambridgeshire active library card holders. That's very impressive. That's 14.5 to 15% of the population have got an active library card. Me being me, that brings the next question: what's your target for this year? Can you get to 20%? But you know, congratulations on. Brian and I had a quick discussion about it. It sounded like a high number to me. I was very impressed with it. But okay, if you can do that for that, can you reach 20-25% of it? It'd be really good.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a number that we're really proud of as well. You know, as you say, as a proportion of the population, it's really significant for a service that, you know, no one's compelled to use. So people actively choose to use it because they see the value in it. I think just to explain, you know, what that means, you know, what it means someone using their library card, you know, not just for book borrowing, but to book a PC, any interaction that requires the customer to use their card counts for that figure. And I think the other data stat which I put in there is this kind of 1.5 million visits, you know, so which is also, I believe, impressively high. I'm trying to remember the second part of your question. Yeah, men sheds. Yeah,
Sheds, yeah.
So yeah, I know that as part of the Know Your Neighbourhood project in Finland, which was actually centred on Chatteris and March. I know that Nicola, the project manager there, I know that she engaged with the men's shed sector, but I'm happy to get some more detail on that for you.
Well, what triggered it for me was Councillor Slatter, Philippa mentioned social prescribers. Social prescribers love a men's shed. They prescribe very actively into the men's shed organisation. So just circling that really seemed to make sense to me when that was brought up. So
I think Lisa's just going to come in at this point and clarify.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a really good point to make sure that we've got that connection between the men's sheds that are operational across Cambridgeshire and the libraries. And I think, Gary, it's something that we can take away and pick up with the community service, because they have got links with all of the men's sheds, and just make sure that there's that join up everywhere. I think, yeah, it's a really good point to make. Thank you.
Just quickly on that point, yeah, that the communities team is our key link. So we've got good links, say St Neots Library and the men's shed there. We've helped sort of stock them up with spare furniture, materials. So it's, yeah, that communities team have been great at creating those links again in Soham, Wendy, and that link was how it came about.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else at all on the libraries? No. Thank you very much to all three of you for your presentation. I've been known to pop into the library occasionally from time to time, as you know, Gary. So I see up close the great work that all of you do in the archive service as well. So thank you very much for your time. We're going to now go to item 9, which is the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Strategy, and that's going to be presented by Faye McCarthy, who's the business partner. Welcome, Faye.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. So this report provides an update on the progress of the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy Action Plan. The action plan underpins the overarching EDI strategy, which includes 12 objectives against 3 themes: our workforce, our communities and our services. The action plan sets out the actions sitting underneath each of our objectives. The action plan is monitored by the EDI Leadership Forum, which meets quarterly, and updates are reported to CLT, this committee and the Staffing and Appeals Committee. Table 1 identifies the colours used to rank rate each action, and tables 2, 3 and 4 provide an overview of the number of actions in each theme and their progress and change since the last update here. The full action plan is provided in Appendix 1 and includes a progress log for more detail. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Faye at all? Claire.
Yes, so objective number 1.1, which is on the recruitment and selection, you're developing guidance to support hiring managers in writing job descriptions and person specifications. It says the start date for that is January 2025. Have you had any, has any of that begun already this month?
Thank you. Yes, it has. And so I can update the action plan to reflect that as well. We've been developing some interview questions for hiring managers to guide them in their recruitment interviews. Thank you.
I'll just follow that through. Has there actually been any hiring this month where those interview questions have been put into practice?
No, not yet, but it's something that we will be monitoring on any guidance that we produce to see if it's been used, has it had an impact, what's the effect of that. So that's something that we'll build into any actions that take place. So hopefully at the next time I come here, I can report something back. Thank you.
Okay, that's very helpful. Anybody else at all? No, I think, well, we seem very content with the report, so well done. We're subject to Claire's suggestions, but thank you very much, Faye. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Item 10, we go to our final item, which is the committee agenda plan. Are there any updates or comments from officers or members on this? The only thing we wanted to mention is Philip has got something, but Lucy mentioned about keeping the momentum going with the closer communities work and just putting that as an action in the agenda for June. Yeah. Okay. Philippa?
Yes, what I'd mentioned right at the beginning of the meeting was about community safety champion role, and indeed the role of the county council in community safety partnerships and the strategy which needs renewing. I know it's on the officers' agenda and it's coming up for an officer meeting, but I would like to see it on.
It's on the spokes agenda for next week, so
Right,
we'll update you on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it needs something there just to remind people that we are part of quite an important thing in a community safety partnership in Peterborough and Cambridgeshire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Well, thank you very much for your fortitude, everybody. That was one of our longer meetings. And we'll next meet on the 27th of February. So have a safe journey home. Thank you.